Prime Minister, welcome to 7:30.
Good evening. Good to be with you, Sarah.
The situation in the Strait of Hormuz is volatile, as well as in the Gulf. And thinking about the last time a deal was done with the Iranians over their nuclear program, it took a very long time. So, speaking frankly, how bad could the consequences get for Australians?
So before talking about how bad the consequences can become for Australians, I really wished Sarah Ferguson would ask Albo why he was the first leader in the world to support the illegal war of aggression that Trump and Israel waged on Iran.
What we want, Sarah, is for a resolution to this conflict.
Really? But we were so happy when it started, didn't we?
That is why we have warned, though, of the consequences.
Did we, though? We were so happy that the using your languages, you supported the US acting to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, even though Iran was not getting a nuclear weapon. So now you're warning about the consequences of an act that you supported, you cheerled.
No country is immune from the impact of this conflict, even though it's happening on the other side of the world.
By the way, the harm that we in Australia and in America and Europe and other parts of the world are suffering is a small fraction of the harm and damage and suffering experienced by the Iranian people. And that does not worry you, did it?
It's having a massive impact on the global economy. It's having a human impact on people in the region. And that's why we want to see a resolution. And that's why on Friday night I participated along with 49 other leaders in a conference to promote the idea of de-escalation, to promote the opening up of the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, I see. Albo participated in a conference to promote the idea of negotiation and opening up, as if Donald Trump gives a flying flamingo, as if Donald Trump listens. He just does what Donald Trump does, regardless of what conference Albo participated in.
The return to normal economic activity, that there are no tolls, no private...
Again, I hate to remind everyone that the normal economic activity that existed before the war on Iran was really not normal, because Iran was under crushing economic sanctions imposed by the US, illegal sanctions supported by the Western countries. And that, again, that does not bother Albo, does it? Because it's our friend doing it. Even though Iran was struggling importing medicine for cancer patients, did not worry Albo. And he wants to go back to that normal, which wasn't really normal, was it?
That there's freedom of movement, because that's essential for the way our global economy operates.
There was no freedom of movement. I mean, I cannot say this enough. There was no freedom of movement of essential goods into Iran, let alone into Gaza and other countries like Cuba and Venezuela that are being illegally sanctioned by the US. So unless we realize, guys, that this was not okay, people were suffering under crushing sanctions by the Europeans, by the Western countries, we are going to have conflicts and we're going to have problems. But that type of things does not worry Albo, does it?
What contingencies have been put in place to send assets to some sort of coalition that would secure the Strait? Not the decisions, but what contingencies have been put in place to send Australian assets?
I doubt any, but let's hear his answer.
Well, we don't go through all of those contingencies. There'll be another meeting in...
There's no contingency, guys. There's no planning. There's no emergency fuel storage or nothing. But we're going to be meeting, and Penny Wong is going to attend that meeting, and she's going to be deeply concerned. That's my guess. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'm going to be very surprised if Penny Wong is going to be deeply concerned.
London held in the end of the week. Australia will participate in that. It's not clear whether that will be in person by a representative or, if not, a virtual meeting. But Australia...
it's going to be a Zoom meeting. That's it. A Zoom meeting was all we needed to solve all the problems in the world.
Australia will play a constructive role, as we always do in...
We were not constructive. We were cheerleading for a war of aggression.
international affairs.
On Donald Trump, you won't answer the question that's been put to you numerous times now about why he keeps criticising Australia on its response to his war. Do you at least understand why people in Australia are so anxious about this?
Well, that's a question for President Trump. I have a respectful relationship with the US President, as is expected of me as Australia's Prime Minister. They're an important ally. In the discussions I've had with him, they've always been very constructive.
Yeah, we respect him. I mean, you respect Donald Trump, but Donald Trump obviously does not respect Australia. It seems that Donald Trump thinks Australia is a US proxy, and when we don't do as he wants us to do, he's mad.
Our most important ally lying about the fact that Australia was asked to do something and failed to do it?
Well, President Trump, of course, has made comments, and one of the comments that I made very early on in the Trump presidency was I wouldn't give an ongoing running commentary on things that are truly obsessed over by journalists, but not necessarily by the public.
If I may jump in there, Prime Minister, I'd just say this. This is our indispensable ally.
So this is Albo's way of escaping answering the question.
As your own defence strategy just made clear only a couple of days ago, he's lashing out at Australia and we don't know why. That's not a journalist obsession.
Well, in response to be clear, Sarah, I've seen the footage in response to a question which invited the sort of statement that was made by the President. What I can say is that the relationship that I have with President Trump is constructive. People have seen that. We've had a number of face-to-face meetings as well as a number of discussions, and they've all been in the interests of both Australia and the United States.
Again, guys, the interest of Australia and the United States might not always overlap. So as Australians, I think it's important for us to think about our own interests, not necessarily the interests of America.
They've been friendly, they've been constructive, they've been important, and I'll continue to do that.
Now, Katie Gallagher said this morning, the Finance Minister, that the budget, the forthcoming budget, will protect businesses and households from impacts of the war. But at the same time, the IMF is warning very strongly against stimulus measures during a period of rising inflation and also against any more handouts. So how will you protect people in this budget without resorting to methods that fuel inflation?
Well, that's why you've got to get the balance right, and that's why our Expenditure Review Committee is working so hard to ensure that occurs.
We're spending. We won't have massive cuts on the spending, guys. So the average people are going to have to bear the brunt of this. The working class, not the billionaires, not the corporations. We don't want to ask them to pay more taxes or anything like that. The people have to. We're going to spend less money on them.
So a range of the measures that we've taken, for example, to protect households is about increasing supply. That's the engagement that I've had with our neighbours. The 250,000 tonnes of fertiliser we're receiving from Indonesia go to help our farmers. The work that we've done in cutting the fuel excise has made a positive difference by reducing the price of petrol and diesel by 32 cents per litre. We'll continue to make sure, as Labor governments always will, to be concerned about cost of living, to particularly provide...
We're just going to be concerned about it. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for being concerned.
protection for the most vulnerable while keeping the economy strong. And it is a matter of ensuring that we do get that balance right, and I'm sure that we will when we hand down the budget in just a few weeks' time.
It is sometimes said that a crisis presents opportunities to think and do things differently. So does this crisis mean that you can think more radically about how to protect the Australian economy?
Well, it certainly presents a challenge, Sarah, there's no question about that. But we've been considering for a period of time issues like intergenerational equity as well, how we give people that stake in the economy. And you'll see in the budget our thinking in practice, put into practice. And we're looking at practical measures though. Obviously the context has meant that we will finalise the budget later than is normal.
Does it also mean that you've had to give up on some of those measures? This was initially framed as a budget about intergenerational equity, that being the lodestar of it, if you like. Now we're in the middle of a crisis that could be a worsening or a lengthening crisis. Does that mean you've had to drop some of the measures that you wanted to bring to this budget?
A theme of the budget will be resilience, whether that be resilience of the economy or resilience in the context of giving people a stake in that economy. Certainly, the challenge before us at the moment has changed since February, since this conflict broke out, and that has had, of course, an impact, and of course that is one of the considerations that we are giving.
This is also a question that we Australian people need to understand, that a war that breaks out tens of thousands of kilometers away, which is primarily over fuel, for a fuel-rich Australia, we should be immune from things like this, a war in Ukraine or a war in the Persian Gulf, because we are one of the largest producers of energy in the world. In fact, we should be celebrating when the price goes up. We shouldn't run into crisis. But here we are.
Expenditure Review Committee that's continuing to meet.
We're hearing opposition calls for more drilling to secure Australian fuel security into the future.
But what's the point of more drilling if the gas companies getting 56% of our gas for free? You can drill all you want, but if you're getting them away for free, I don't think it's going to solve our problem, is it?
Drilling more refinery. Is more refining capacity something that you are discussing now amongst yourselves?
We're discussing the whole range of opportunities that are there to make fuel security stronger.
Does that include changing now, reversing course, if you like, on the long series of closures under both governments of refining capacity in Australia?
Well, let's be very clear, Sarah. There were 6 refineries when we left office in 2013. When we returned to office in 2022, there were just 2.
Well, let's be very clear about that, because the decision on 2 of those refineries was made under the Labor government. It happened under the Liberal coalition government, was made under Labor. No,
that wasn't a Labor government decision. They were private sector decisions in which the incoming government did nothing to intervene.
This is another problem. How can we trust the private sector to produce our energy when at any time they could say, actually, this is not profitable, we want to stop producing. Or we prefer to ship all of this energy overseas because the price is rising overseas because of the war in Ukraine and the war in the Persian Gulf. But how come we don't have a national energy company that produces energy or extracts energy for our own domestic consumption at the price of the cost of production cost? Doesn't that make the most sensible solution?
And then it kept going, and then they made the extraordinary decision to put our fuel reserves in Texas. Now, had we been...
Of course, because they are the real powers in this country. We, the people, have no say about our resources, our energy, and these private sector mining giants, many of them overseas, owned by the overseas companies, are basically deciding what to do with our energy. And oftentimes it's more profitable for them to export it for massive profit.
In that situation, when this global crisis occurred, we would have been much more vulnerable. As it was, what we did was bring that reserve back to Australia. We also had the strongest reserves in 15 years. So we will look at the full range of opportunities which are there. We're very open to pursuing those. We're engaging with the private sector in particular, and we'll engage, of course, with state and territory colleagues as well.
Just a quick question on the NDIS, because the Treasurer Jim Chalmers has made it clear that that's going to be the most important measure in terms of savings to carry out some budget repair. How difficult are the states making?
Isn't it interesting? They always say budget repair, savings. They don't use the word funding cuts.
It for you to carry out that budget repair on the NDIS?
Well, they have a stake.
It's just budget repair, guys. They're just repairing. That's all. They're not cutting the funding, repairing.
As well, the states agreed as part of the health funding agreements that they would contribute 8%, up to 8% of the growth. So they have a stake in making sure that this system is sustainable. But more importantly than that, I think right around the National Cabinet table, there is agreement about how important the NDIS is. I'm very proud that it is a great Labor reform, but we need to make sure that it is sustainable into the future. Now, we've already halved the growth which is there, and that's important, Sarah. We're not talking about cuts here. We're talking about we've already halved the growth. Clearly, there is more work to be done, because I want to see an Australia where every Australian is proud of the NDIS, where people who need that support are receiving it to fully participate in society. And that is why the NDIS was created, and that is why it is supported overwhelmingly by Australians. But if Australians can see waste and some of the manipulation that's occurred of the system, then it won't have that uniform support that is so important.
Well, NDIS, to me it seems that NDIS was privatizing disability care. We could still have delivered quality disability services by the government, but the Labour Party under Julia Gillard decided to privatize it. And a lot of people became very rich. A lot of for-profit providers became very, very rich. And the system is not sustainable. So I don't see how Albo is so proud of the scheme when the government is basically just issuing the checks and not directly delivering the care that people with a disability need.
So that people get that support who need it.
And just to finish, just going back to the last conversation that we had on 7:30, you said then that you supported the US contention that they had achieved regime change.
Oh, that's such a joke. Oh my God. They assassinated the leader, and the leader's son, so Ayatollah Khamenei, was assassinated. Ayatollah Khamenei Jr. is now the leader, and Trump calls that a regime change. It could not be more regime continuity.
In Iran, but the new figures in the Iranian regime appear to be more hardline than the previous ones. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is more powerful even than before. Do you still endorse the...
Of course. What did you expect? Every time there is a foreign threat, people rally around the flag, and the central government gets more support from the people, because the people see their government, the only people protecting them against the killings and slaughter of children unleashed by our dear allies, the United States and Israel.
US claim that regime change has been achieved?
Well, that is a fact that they have made that statement, and there are different people in charge by definition. Ayatollah Khomeini was removed in the most brutal way possible, and the United States undertook this action. They have themselves said that the aims and objectives have been achieved. What we want to see is a de-escalation. We've consistently...
I think the United States and Trump administration calls this a regime change achieved because they want to save face. They want to pretend that they are victorious. They don't want to say, oh, actually, the opposite of what we intended happened. That's not what they want to admit. They want to admit it was a spectacular victory. That's why they want to call it regime change. But obviously, it's not regime change.
We called for that. We want the talks to resume, and we hope that they...
The talks, I mean, how could the talk resume? I mean, I think Iranian side would be out of their mind to sit down again for a number of reasons. Because the last two times they sat down for a negotiation with the US, they got attacked. And we also remember when the Hamas people were convening a meeting, discussing the peace proposal from the United States in Doha, Qatar, the Israelis bombed them and tried to kill the negotiators. So I think if Iranian team goes to Istanbul, it's possible that Israelis or Americans or both would try to kill the negotiators. So I don't see why would Iran go back to the negotiation table.
They do, and that is something that the whole world is looking towards because they want to see an end to the conflict. They want to see peace in the region, but importantly as well, they also want to see the economic impact be diminished. This will have a long tail, Sarah, this impact, and I'll be convening National Cabinet again in coming days, not to make any change to the levels we're on, but to once again talk with state and territory colleagues about where we're at and to have that dialogue that's so important that we all move together as one nation.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for...
Yep, here we are being led by a Prime Minister who unfortunately does not have a good understanding of the root cause of all the problems we are facing inside the country and overseas. See you later.